like the Indian word for these mysterious buildings, means funeral. These towers were built for the dead. Behind the long tiles, we discover a hidden mass grave, a chamber for the bodies of high-ranking citizens. In this chamber, there are no skeletons. Instead, we come across a stranger sight. In baskets made of grass, there are well-preserved mummies. The carbon method for dating their funeral robes tell us that the chulpas were built around 800 AD, long before the Incas. Is it possible this culture flourished in such an arid landscape? Or was the world different then? Right around the chulpas, you can find the fossils of animals and plants long since extinct in this particular region. These remains tell a very different story about this land. This profile of a fish, for instance, tells us that part of this plateau, probably millions of years ago, was covered by a large body of water. This lake is what's left of the huge sea of the Andes. At the end of the last ice age, retreating glaciers left a huge freshwater sea in these flat lands. The highest sea in the world once covered 5,000 square miles. Now, Lake Titicaca, which accounts for the mild climates here, is all that remains. The temperate climate allows corn and grain to grow at 12,600 feet above sea level. So for thousands of years, the inhabitants survived by farming. Even the llamas and alpacas enjoy easy foraging. They provide meat and wool as they have for centuries. A llama can carry 100 pounds, enough so the Incas used herds to transport food to supply their armies. They could move up to 8 miles a day through hostile terrain. With such transportation and ingenuity, the Inca were able to conquer more than 100 neighboring tribes. There's a belt of water grass around the shore of the lake. From this grass, the Indians long ago built light boats with steering gear. With a way to navigate the waters, they were able to sail to small islands and peninsulas and set up holy places. Here, they came to pay homage to a gem with healing qualities. It was called the Copacabana. A small city grew up here. Today, it's a Christian shrine. There's a strange cliff ridge above Copacabana. The first inhabitants believed such bizarrely formed stones had magical properties. Where the cliff escarpment ends, there is an astonishing sight. 2 parallel natural columns rise, joined across the top by a crossbeam, the Incan gallows. But the gallows were not left by the Inca, nor was it a place of execution, and more astonishingly, it is not a natural occurrence. This structure was built by ancient Indians and deliberately placed here. On both sides, a broad ledge was cut from the stone to support the granite beam. This construction was an observatory. The compass shows that this cliff grouping lies east-west. The crossbeam, on the other hand, lies exactly north-south. What does all this mean? Recently, Bolivian scientists have investigated this site thoroughly. They found an artificial hole in a cliff face diagonally across from the gallows. They made a startling discovery. On June 21st, the winter solstice in this hemisphere, the rays of the morning sun shine exactly through the hole in the cliff and project a circle of light on the dark crossbeam. But on the equinoxes, March 21st and September 21st, the point of a sighting stone 120 feet away throws a 3-cornered shadow on the fully lighted beam. This is neither a wonder of nature nor an accident. The two-column sights, the three-cornered sighting stones, and the circular hole had to be precisely calculated, and the proportion of the crossbeam exactly determined. The sun patterns that appear on the beam only on June 21st, March 21st, and September 21st all signify life-determining dates in the ancient sun year and even today. A calendar that marks the beginning of planting, the time of and the end of the dry season. The so-called gallows was a perfectly functional observatory built long before the Incas. The temple in the background is a full-scale monument to the sun god of Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku is one of the most important and oldest centers of prehistoric America. It began in 1500 BC as a village and later developed into a religious focal point. These ruins of stone walls meet exactly at right angles, showing highly developed technical knowledge and design. Tiled culverts were built into the outer walls to drain off rainfall. These ancient cities were built for comfort and durability. And always we find the religious theme. The lives of the ancients were inextricably entwined with their gods. The architects here not only built to height to please the sun god. This sacred spot was sunk 5 feet into the ground. Perhaps it was dedicated to a god of the earth. From all 4 walls, mask-like stone heads stare at us. Are they reminders of the bloody war ritual of taking enemy heads as trophies? Or do they represent human sacrifices to the gods? No one knows for sure. The largest sculptures of ancient America stand here in Tiwanaku. They're 22 feet high, cut from a single block. What do they represent? It may be the legend of those giants who carved a city from a hostile desert. The sun ruled the pilgrimage rites of Tiwanaku. A monument was built to this, the Door of the Sun. It's 10 feet high and 13 feet wide, carved from one block. It's been split by lightning and put back together. The door today opens on nothing. The sun has indeed set on this glorious empire.
Terra-X. Return in a moment.
The ruins of Chan Chan are spread over 11 square miles. The city was planned down to the tiniest details. The Chimu were capable specialists. They organized thousands of workers to build this huge oasis paradise just steps away from raw desert. The buildings still standing are impressive for their right-angled forms and clear symmetry. Imagine the wall from inside, covered with great paintings. The castles of the gods of Chan Chan are hidden behind massive walls. The walls are much wider at the bottom, which makes them very strong. Only the priests were allowed in here. They entered the holy area through a tunnel, then up a wide ramp and into the temple of the dragon. There are great decorations on the walls of this building. They were carved in damp clay 1,000 years ago. The main motif seems to be the snake, with heads on both ends, the dragon which gave its name to the people. This monster represented to the Chimu the sky above the roaring sea. To make their palaces even more beautiful, they draped the most precious covers over the walls. They used yards and yards of cloth with thousands of little gold plates sewn in. Today we find only remnants in the world's museums. The Chimu were the best goldsmiths in ancient Peru. The Incas conquered them in 1470 and probably learned their techniques, but never achieved the same high standard. This is the best Chimu work, 22-karat gold with turquoise inlay. This legendary figure crowns the handle of a knife with a half-moon blade. These knives, known as tumis, were used by the Peruvian Indians to cut into the scalp for head surgery. After removing a part of the skull, this patient had a gold plate inserted. We don't know if he survived the operation. This is Cusco, the capital of the Incas. Cusco means navel or birthplace. To mark the spot, the Incas built a field of joy in the middle of their city. Today it is the Spanish Plaza de Armas, the center of weapons. The temple of the new religion, Christianity, was built as the Church of Jesuits of La Campagna in Baroque style in 1652. The demons of defense on the facade clearly show Indian traits. The sons of the glorious sun god were turned into demons by Christian conquerors. The eastern side of the plaza has been dominated by the cathedral since it was built. It stands on the foundations of an Incan palace. And yet there are still strong reminders of the defenses of the Incas. In Cusco, we come across the beautifully built stone walls, row on row. But whatever they built, it was not enough to keep away the waves of invaders trying to take their gold and destroy their empire. The Inca front fell finally to the Spaniards, and their last king was taken prisoner in 1532. 1 year later, a military court ruled on trumped-up charges against the Incan king, most likely accusing him of the worst of all possible crimes, being a pagan in a land they were desperately and violently trying to convert to Christianity. The court imposed the death penalty. The king let himself be baptized rather than be burned. They renamed him Don Juan Atagalpa, then destroyed him and his golden empire forever. They strangled him with iron wire. The unknown artists who made this colonial period painting weren't on hand for the execution and might have exaggerated the scene. But even if the king did not suffer such a brutal death, the painting represents the violent death of an entire nation. The remarks made by the court suggest he was buried according to Christian burial rites. Ironic for a king who was the head of one of the most powerful and complex religions in history. This is the last stop on our trip through the history of ancient cultures. A lonesome spot in southeast Peru, 12,800 feet above sea level. The ruins of round towers rise high over the Uleo Sea. We've seen buildings like this in Bolivia. They were built with clay bricks there. Here they're made of carefully fitted stones. Some of them carry relief decorations in the form of a lizard or a snake. They're both symbols of the earth, where life begins and ends. Again, we find the Chulpas, the temple of the dead. The mountain people buried their dead rulers here in the 1400s. Later, the Incas buried their dead in the same place. The Spanish would never understand why these simple pagans made such a fuss over dying. These towers of silence in one of the most isolated corners of the world remind us just how fleeting power and life itself can be. But even though the glory of the ancients has passed, their legacy flows through history like a mournful melody, like the melody played at the burial of an Incan ruler, the Ajarachi, Song of the Dead. It laments the death of the ancient worshippers of the sun.